When does Israel have the right to defend itself? When? Once it has a definite final border and somebody has encroached in that border. But can you tell me what borders Israel is defending?
Ambassador, welcome back, and thank you for your very moving address. I first wanted to ask, since we're in the Oxford Union, about the recent decision of the Labour Conference that you attended that banned the use of the words apartheid and genocide. We've all seen the horrific images today of children burning in the Jabalia refugee camp. Do you think there is a freedom of expression issue around what is going on now in Gaza?
Well, I followed that case and we delivered our message very clearly to the Labour Party, to the government, and to all political actors in this country that it is absolutely the right of the people to express themselves publicly and freely within the contours of law. We added that genocide as a term is now being used by the highest court of the land. That's the ICJ. The ICJ has said already in January that the crime of genocide being committed by Israel against the Palestinian people is plausible. And therefore the ICJ has placed Israel officially on trial for genocide. Once that is there, then the conversation should be over. So we are working with all parties and all, parts of the government here and the political parties and the parliament to make sure that nobody is censoring the conversation. There has been enough censoring over a long period of time. People have been subjected to witch hunt. This has got to end. That includes in academia. We have followed cases of students being suspended. We have followed of cases of professors being suspended for voicing their opinion. This is not healthy. Academia is there primarily as a healthy place for debates and conversations. Let people express themselves, again, within the contours of law. But I can assure you that I myself, as the ambassador, was in the Labour Party conference, gave a couple of speeches, and I did mention genocide, and I did mention everything, and nobody spoke to me. I'm fine, I'm sitting next to you.
Well, also on the point of freedom of expression, you say that you're opposed to censorship, but in 2023, the Palestinian Lawyers for Justice said that at least 20 journalists, political activists, and lawyers were arbitrarily arrested in Palestine because they slandered the president. I think it was one of the charges, inciting ethnic strife. This was done at the back of the presidential election that was cancelled. Do you think this is also an attempt by your party to silence political opposition in Palestine?
They shouldn't. And our respect to the freedom of expression starts at home. And I assure you that in Palestine you will have a lot of healthy debates happening. People are very expressive, and rightly so, because they are going through a very difficult situation. The presidential elections you're talking about was already the attempted elections that was thwarted by Israel, preventing us from convening elections in Jerusalem, was already 3 years ago, 2021. So I don't know about the numbers, but I assure you that we in Palestine care a lot about making sure that what we call for in the international arena is what we give to our own people.
Thank you. So do you condemn that? Do you condemn these journalists who are being put in prison because they oppose Mahmoud Abbas?
Ebrahim, I really don't know what journalists you're talking about. We didn't have 20 journalists in prison. I think this, you got a report from somewhere. But if anybody...
This is a report by the Palestinian Lawyers for Justice. Let's put that aside. You're an advisor to the Palestinian president. 92% of Palestinians polled, this is a poll in September of 2024, think Mahmoud Abbas should resign. They think he's an incompetent president. They think he's corrupt. Do you think Mahmoud Abbas should resign? As his advisor, would you tell him to resign?
That's a decision up to the Palestinian people, right? And what we pride ourselves the most is that any Palestinian leader or president has got to be elected by his own people. And that's why we insist on our democratic process as the only way of ensuring our legitimacy and our representation outside. Yasser Arafat, who is the founder and the father of the national movement and the nation, when he returned to Palestine, he offered himself to the ballot box and to the Palestinian people and was elected. So is President Mahmoud Abbas. He was elected. Now, we should have convened elections earlier, but I assure you there are many obstacles, because convening elections and the absence of sovereignty and freedom makes your occupier have an absolute authority and power over you, have a veto power over you. And your occupier would want a result of elections that suits their sort of mindset and interests. That's why in 2006, when we convened elections, that was described by world observers, including former US President Carter, one of the most democratic, transparent in the world. Hamas won the elections because we also want the Palestinian people to decide who should lead and who should govern. So, my only recommendation, Ebrahim, the Palestinian people must be respected, and they will have to elect their leaders, and the current leader was elected.
He was elected, you are right, but he was elected in 2005, almost 20 years ago now. Do you think he should end the state of emergency and seek to put it to the Palestinian people, to have a representative of their own who enjoys their confidence? Would that not strengthen your position? You're here in the West, in the UK, in America, when you're advocating for the Palestinian cause. Would that not strengthen your position when you're representing a leader that actually enjoys the confidence of Palestinian people, and not a leader that 92% of Palestinians think should resign?
I think you're wrong here, Ebrahim. Wrong big time. And wrong because you are adopting an Israeli logic that has been going on for a long time, that the problem in Palestine is leadership. That's why they besieged Yasser Arafat. Let me finish. They besieged Yasser Arafat and they killed him live on camera. And then they said he was the problem. And then in every turn of the corner, they come out and say, only if the Palestinians convene that elections, only if the Palestinians elect a different leader. President Abbas is known to be a one who has adopted a very diplomatic, peaceful approach to ending this conflict. The logic here goes in, the problem, the ball is in the court of Palestinians. If we have good leaders, okay. If we don't have good leaders, if we have good governance, if we don't have good governance, let's agree on one thing. Our right to self-determination, our rights in general, our right to freedom, our right to dignity, our right to equality has got nothing to do with our behavior. If we behave good and if we don't behave, we have got to have our rights. There is a logic that always say for all these years, oh, Palestinians are mismanaged. Only if Palestinians could convene another round of elections. Only Palestinians if they pick a better leader. I think that's an extension of the colonial racist mindset. Leave the issue of who leads us to us. And move on.
I will move on from that point, but before I do that, I still do want to ask, I'm not conflating here whether Palestinians have a right to freedom or not. I'm not saying that if they do not have a democratically elected government, then that means they can't demand to be free from a colonial force. But what I'm saying here is that one of their rights as well is that the person and the government that demands that right is a government that represents them. So before we move on from this question, would you advise President Abbas to convene a presidential election at any point soon?
Yes, and he was about to convene elections, go back to the record, and he was the one a year later after he was elected insisted to convene elections, and guess what? Ebrahim. Washington was on the phone, and you're right, I'm close, so I know. Many other Western governments were on the phone telling our president, do not convene elections. Okay? Hamas will win. And he insisted that no matter what, we have to maintain the process regardless of the outcome. And Hamas won in 2006. And what happened? What happened? I'll tell you what happened. The world, the Western world, laid siege on the Palestinian government, cut all funding. There is the hypocrisy. There is the double standards. There is the lecturing about liberal values, democracy, because the West want a democratic process, but they can only want it and endorse it if it brings the results they want. This is nonsense. Nonsense. And then we have gone through many experiences where it is really rather about the means rather than the ends. For us, Ebrahim, and I'm speaking to everybody, elections is a tool. It's not an end. The end is our emancipation. The end is our freedom. The end is our liberation. The end is our sovereignty. The end is our people are able to exist in freedom. And then there you will have democracy. You have full democracy, because there the state will be obliged under constitutional arrangements to convene as a sovereign regular elections. And I'm not saying we shouldn't convene elections now. We must. We must. But things are way more complicated than to reduce it that at a time of genocide, at a time when the Palestinian people are being targeted in Gaza, in the West Bank and everywhere, then the issue is, let's throw a round of elections. And even if we do, and even if a new Palestinian leader is elected, Israel will walk away. Everything will be fine. So we need to make sure that at this point in time, the Palestinian people are united. The unity of our territory and the unity of our people and the unity of our institutions, because I assure you, as much as Israel is after our people in Gaza and after Hamas in Gaza, they are after the Palestinian institutions in the West Bank. And look, in the last few years, what they have done. They have cut all funding, our own money, because Israel needs no Palestinian strong national address. Do I need to tell you this, Ebrahim, how much they are fighting us more than they are fighting anybody else? Because they know. Do I need to tell you that they were funding the Palestinian division? Do you know that Netanyahu was sending money to Hamas in Gaza to sustain the division? Because he thinks that will break bone. And why do you listen from me? Listen from him. He said in the UN and everywhere, that's Netanyahu, that his biggest sort of enemy now is the PLO and the Palestinian leadership. He described us as terrorists in suits, and that we are engaged in lawfare against Israel and we are taking Israel to the ICC. Anyway, at this point in time, what we need is unity. And I think the Palestinian people need unity the most. And I think you've seen that unity in the last few months, because all of them are targeted and all of them have one goal.
You mentioned unity, so I wanted to ask you about the Beijing Declaration, which was signed in July between all of the Palestinian factions. Do you think this will have a tangible impact on the factionalism and the division that we now see between the Palestinian groups? Will we finally see a united front representing Palestinians? Of
course, that's the purpose, and that's why they are keen to go and keen to engage and keen to stretch out all the differences. And by the way, only the last 2 days they were in Cairo as well, following up from the meeting on. So all this is welcomed. And this is not something we say in Oxford. We say with the government here that we see no future without the unity of the Palestinian people and the political factions. So yes. And we have to hammer down any differences. And we have to be immune against some narrative that will make us conditioned and our rights conditioned upon some sort of, that we have to be state-worthy. State-worthy. And to be state-worthy, somebody has to decide with a pen and ticking boxes. Oh, we did this, we did that. We have to be careful about how do we propose this. But yes, unity is paramount.
Thank you, Ambassador. My next question is on Hamas. Right now, Hamas enjoys, amongst the Palestinian people, a lot more support than the PA. Even 1 year on the war, you'd expect Hamas to lose a lot of popularity, given what has happened so far. Why do you think that is?
Who's losing popularity?
No, I'm saying, why do you think Hamas is gaining and not losing popularity amongst the Palestinians?
I don't know about gaining or losing, but I know that at one point we will offer all this to the Palestinian people and they will decide. Leave that to the Palestinian people. They will decide. I can assure you one thing. No. The Palestinian ambassador represents the state, and the state responsibility is to make sure that the process is transparent, is democratic, is legitimate, is credible. And then the Palestinian ambassador and the people he represents should just leave it to the Palestinian people. They have the absolute freedom and the legitimacy to choose whoever they want to be in leadership. And once they do, all of us, the rest of us, has got to respect their choices.
Moving on to October 7th, Hamas entered Israel and killed hundreds of people at the music festival 1 week ago last year. The UN Special Representative, and I'm quoting here, the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, found clear and convincing information that sexual violence, including rape, sexualized torture, cruel and inhuman and degrading treatment, has occurred during that attack. In an interview in the BBC some time ago, you said that Israel does not have the right to defend itself. When such actions happen by Hamas, why do you think Israel does not have the right to defend itself?
Number one, I didn't say Israel doesn't have the right to defend itself. I said the right to self-defense that was granted to Israel by its Western backers was the wrong approach, and it's illegal what happened. And let me explain. What is Israel defending in its war now in Lebanon? It's defending its genocide in Gaza. It has deflated to Lebanon to defend, because the whole thing with Lebanon was about to stop the war on Gaza, right? The Lebanese side was calling for a ceasefire. So it didn't want to reach a ceasefire. Therefore, that was not an act of self-defense, was primarily an act to continue to defend the genocide in Gaza. And what was Israel doing for the last year in Gaza? Defending what? Think with me. I think it's defending its occupation and colonization in the West Bank. The right to self-defense is granted to states with very well-defined borders. And that right to self-defense would be primarily defense. If an approaching other state, an army, that state has the right to actually fend them off. صح? Right? Does that dynamic or the whole thing exist in Israel? Is this the Israeli situation? Do you have two states, two armies? Or you have an occupier and occupied? And if it's an occupier and occupied, as per international consensus and law, then this whole concept of self-defense does not apply. The international law is very clear, and I hope you have experts here to tell you that international law has stipulated the responsibilities of occupiers. That includes not only not targeting civilians, by the way, that includes the protection of civilians, the provision of services like health and education to civilians. So the right that was enacted since the 7th of October does not apply on Israel. When does Israel have the right to defend itself? When? Once it has a definite final border and somebody has encroached in that border. But can you tell me what borders Israel is defending? Tell me, Ebrahim. What borders are they defending? What entity are they defending? I'll tell you what they're defending. They're defending their expansions. They're defending their colonialism. They're defending their subjugation and oppression.
Just following on from that, we've seen the Iranian attacks and the attacks by Hezbollah in the last few weeks against Israel. What do you make of that? Does the PA support that?
Support what?
Support the attacks by Iran and by Hezbollah into Israel.
First of all, I want you to correct some of the terminology. The PA does not have external arms. Our ambassadors and our envoys of the state of Palestine. And the government of the state of Palestine is the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. London here in the UK, the mission here is the PLO mission. In Washington, where I used to head the mission, it was the PLO mission. Because the one political entity that represents all Palestinians is the PLO. The PA is a national institution that was created by the PLO to undertake our responsibilities under Oslo. So we fulfill our side of the story. Israel has not fulfilled its side of the story, which was very simple, backroll occupation. It has strengthened, deepened its occupation over the last 30 years. So the PA is not the question. Don't ask me about the PA. Ask me about the state of Palestine and the PLO. And I'll tell you that our position is very clear. We reject wholeheartedly the targeting of civilians from any side. That's number one. We reject it, not by words, by deeds. By deeds. We believe in the power of peaceful, popular resistance. We believe in the power of international legality. We believe in the power of the international movement that your colleagues here are helping building together. And we want to build something like the anti-apartheid movement, because we believe that the power of the people have managed to actually collapse the apartheid regime of South Africa and help free Nelson Mandela. And we, as in the state of Palestine and the PLO, want to see an immediate and permanent ceasefire. We're working with all of our partners towards that end. We want to see a massive, unprecedented humanitarian assistance go unfettered to Gaza, because the situation is unimaginable. We want to, and we've begun to put together a program for reconstruction and rebuilding of Gaza. We will not allow for anybody to serve our people except ourselves. Only Palestinians will be in charge of Palestinians. And only the PLO and its institutions are the only legitimate sign. So there are many ideas about the day after in Gaza. There is no other idea, only the PLO and the state of Palestine. That is legitimate in the eyes of its own people. And from there, we want to move into building a system of accountability. That's why it was the state of Palestine that went to the ICC, right? It was the state of Palestine that approached the ICJ. It is the state of Palestine that has tabled all these resolutions to build international consensus, as we did only a few days ago at the General Assembly. And it is the state of Palestine that will press ahead not only with accountability, but with sanctions. That's why we are engaging all these international partners, including here in the UK. And that's why you heard recently that the UK has pulled out its intervention at the ICC, saying that they now respect the independence of the ICC, and they have imposed some sanctions on some settlers, and we are working to expand that system of sanctions to include all settlements and all settlers. We also are working with the current government to recognize the state of Palestine. And there is a lot of pressure points here, a lot of movement here with the making of the British society, the British people, and the making of the nations here. I just came from Wales. Next week I am in Scotland. So the pressure is concerted. So the UK does the right thing and finally recognize the state of Palestine, an act that is long overdue because it's a right, not a gift. It's an inalienable right of the Palestinian people. And every day the UK waits is another day in what we are witnessing now, because it is the right thing to do, because it provides clarity, and because it takes us forward as opposed to backward.
Thank you, Ambassador. I want to move to audience questions, but before I do that, I want to ask a question about the ceasefire. Do you think there is any potential for ceasefire to be agreed anytime soon?
Well, so far the US has thrown its hands in the air and said, they couldn't. And I'm not aware of serious negotiations, talks about this. And the reason for that is that while the world was, including the US, demanding ceasefire, they did not create the leverage to enforce a ceasefire, all the way to a Security Council resolution in May. And if you remember the Biden initiative for a ceasefire in March, and it has 3 phases, it was spelled out, and Netanyahu simply rejected it. But then, how do you enforce this on Netanyahu? It's what I just said. You need sanctions, you need arms embargo, you need to really tell him that, listen, either you really listen to us and do what we want, or there will be consequences. So far, Netanyahu thinks he can do whatever he wants, and he is capable to do so without any consequences. So that's why we're working with our allies to enforce a ceasefire, and to enforce a ceasefire, you need to make Netanyahu pay attention. And the best way to make him pay attention is arms. Because he went to the Congress and he said only a couple of months ago in July, he said this, he said, give me the tools faster and I will finish the job faster. First, what is the tools? What does he mean by the tools? Arms. The 2,000 pounds bombs that drops in UN shelters. The bunker bombs that kills. That's US provided, and some of it is UK, by the way, and European, German. That's the tools. And what is the job? What is the job? It's the war of extermination I tried to explain earlier. So, yeah, we need to do a lot of work to make sure that it is not Israel that will be doing what we want at the asking. It is us as an international community able to enforce our will.
So just following up on the point of the arms embargo that you talked about, the British government has partially suspended arms sales to Israel. Do you think that decision is performative, or do you think it achieves anything?
Huh?
Do you think the decision is performative, or do you think it actually achieves anything? Does it send any message to Israel?
The arms embargo?
Yes,
well,
the partial embargo.
They suspended some arms licenses, and we believe it's a small step in the right direction, but not enough. We need to build on it, so it turns into a full suspension, full arms embargo. But, if you can't have everything, at least start with something and build on it. The principle has been established that Israel violates the basic provisions of international law. And as such, the UK government had to take a decision to suspend some arms. They say they suspended all arms that end up being used in Gaza. Well, we know they didn't, because still the F-35s are exempted from that arms embargo or that suspension of arms licenses. We want to make sure that all arms that end up in the genocide in Gaza are suspended. And we want to make sure all arms, period. Because, like money, weapons are fungible. You know what that means? If you send them to the West Bank, they could use other weapons in Gaza. A country that is charged with the crime of crimes, which is genocide, in the ICJ. A country that has received that advisory opinion, and the global judges say no country should avail any material support. Every third party, including the UK, must just stop everything. Not one bullet, not one goggle, not one, nothing. That's our demand, and that's what we are working towards.
Thank you, Ambassador.